Hello, I'm Beryl Dakers. Welcome to Palmetto Scene. We're here on the State House grounds where a very solemn observance took place just a few days ago. October is designated Domestic Violence Awareness Month all across the nation, and it is important to recognize that domestic violence impacts millions of people, men, women, and children. All can be victims who suffer devastating effects, and sometimes even death. A few days ago, here on the South Steps at the State House, we paused in recognition of the lives lost here in South Carolina. For more on this story, here's our Desiree Cheeks.
It's a sunny yet solemn day here on the grounds of the State House as we gather to honor lives lost to domestic violence in our state. Currently, South Carolina ranks 6th in the nation for the amount of homicides caused by domestic violence. Each year in October, the Attorney General hosts a silent witness ceremony to honor the victims from the preceding year.
I want you to know that you are not alone in your pain, you are not alone in your grief, you are not alone because we are all here with you.
The COVID pandemic has affected every facet of life, and the crime is no exclusion or exception to that fact. Obviously, when people are isolated and people are under stress and there are exacerbating factors that can affect that home dynamic, you're going to obviously see a spike or the potential for a spike in those types of domestic abuse situations occur. And obviously this year's statistics will not be reflected until next year. Of course, we're talking about 2019, the pre-pandemic. So we don't quite yet know how the pandemic is going to affect those types of crimes. And I think it's important that the families of those people who lost their lives to domestic violence, homicide, know that they are not alone. They feel alone at times, but they're not alone. There's an entire community of people out there, whether it's victim service providers, prosecutors, law enforcement officials. Every facet of South Carolina is behind these families, and we want them to know that. We want them to know that they're not alone and we have their back.
During the ceremony, wooden silhouettes represent the women and men who have died due to domestic violence in South Carolina during the previous year.
In the story of the Phoenix, a beautiful spirit rises from the fire and ashes to thrive and prosper. That's in essence the story of Nefertiti Smalls, who witnessed and suffered domestic abuse for most of her adolescent life. She emerged from the pain of domestic violence to create Healing Hurts Ministries. Through her book, Cries from Within, and the short film, Escape to Tell, she uses her life experiences to help free other victims from the lingering negative effects of domestic violence.
I always tell people that I didn't choose the topic of domestic violence, it chose me. I know I did not get to this place without God. So it was my relationship with the Lord that really helped to build who I am today. When I was a young girl, actually at the age of 3, my family and I used to live in Brooklyn, New York, and my father brutally murdered my mother in front of myself and my siblings. And after that murder, we were all sent to South Carolina to live with relatives. Not only did I face that domestic violence, but I also experienced sexual assault from a family member, as well as verbal, mental, emotional abuse growing up. And anybody that knows anything about childhood trauma, having dealt with domestic violence so early, it only just built upon all of the hurt that I was experiencing, which made it difficult for me to, be a young woman, how to develop my identity, who I was. And so I really felt compelled to reach out to the other Nefertitis who may have been experiencing similar things. I know everybody doesn't go through the same thing, but maybe somebody's experienced domestic violence and maybe they've experienced sexual assault. Maybe they've had the neglect and abuse, but I wanted them to know that they're not defined by what they're experiencing. You can escape to tell.
Baby, what's wrong?
Why don't you believe?
Baby, did you take your medicine today?
Why you don't believe?
Eric, don't start today.
Start what?
This. Eric.
Don't start what?
This. Please, not today.
Start what?
I don't know what you're talking about. Eric, did you take your medicine today, baby? Don't start today, baby. Don't start today. Don't start with me today, Eric. No! No, Eric! Get off of me! No.
That's how it's gonna be, huh?
Eric, baby, you gotta get help. I can't do this with you no more, Eric. You gotta get help. You gotta get help. Eric, you gotta get help. I can't do this with you. Eric, I can't do this. Stop.
What?
Eric,
Huh?
stop.
You gonna kill me?
Eric, stop. Oh, God, don't make me use it. I swear I will. Eric,
kill me?
please.
Daddy.
When I started out making the film, I'm going to be honest, I never had any idea that I would do a film based off of my life story. I released a book back in 2004. It was called Cries from Within. When I was going through, all of what I experienced as a child, I started writing poetry and just different things just to help me to cope. And so after I gave my life to the Lord, He impressed upon my heart to release a book for other people to come through. And so that's what I did. And while doing an interview with someone in the Charleston area, they connected me with an executive producer and thought, you could reach more people because everybody doesn't read books, but we know everybody watches movies. So we connected, and from there, the doors swung open. And so with that, we were able to produce that film. Now, let me tell you, it was emotionally gripping to look at watching your life on screen. But I was even more empowered because I realized that me being transparent, me telling my story was setting somebody else free. So I've had multiple people share their testimonies of how they never told anyone that they were sexually assaulted, never told anyone about the abuse they endured as a child. But because of my bravery to stand and open up and tell my story, other people's story was told as well. We have a forum, it's called Not on My Watch, which is a conversation between the church and other leaders in the community who deal with domestic violence. What we do know is that most people report their abuse to their clergy, to a faith leader or someone in the congregation, over 80% of the people. And because of that, and we know that over 20 years, South Carolina has ranked in the top 10 as one of the worst states to live for females because they're killed by a boyfriend, spouse, or a living partner, or ex-boyfriend. So if we know that the church is one of the places where it's being reported the most, then what are we doing to make sure that we are advocating inside our churches for relationships? Not to blame anybody or to say that it's the church's fault, but just raising awareness and letting the church know that because this part of advocacy is important, it's people from the community that are coming to our churches. Are we making sure we're implementing to know what relationships look like or what they should look like? Or making sure if somebody's experienced abuse as a child or are even in their young adult years, are they totally healed? We're ministering to their spirit, but are their emotions really whole? So that's the purpose of our conversation. I was somebody who was affected by domestic violence because my mom's life was taken, and I witnessed that. And so what I encourage you to do is to recognize that you are not defined by what you have experienced. You have the power and authority to determine what you're going to allow in your life, what you're going to do, where do you see yourself in the future, and recognizing that there's truly a plan for who you are and for what you will become. If you're in that situation right now, just know that there's another woman, there's another man, there's another boy or girl that needs to hear your story, not as a survivor, but as a thriver.
We're joined now by Sarah Barber, who is the Executive Director of SCADVASA, the South Carolina Coalition Against domestic violence and sexual assault. And Sarah, we know that October is the month for domestic violence, but actually domestic violence apparently never takes a holiday.
It never does, and it certainly hasn't during this special time that we've experienced this year with the pandemic. We know that when people are sheltered in place, that often means that they're with an abuser and that violence can continue, and that it's harder for them to reach out for help when they aren't going to work or their kids are home from school. It becomes very difficult to find those precious few minutes that you might need to call and ask someone for assistance.
South Carolina has the unenviable history of generally being in the top 10 among all states in terms of the numbers of domestic violence cases. This year, as we saw at the silent witness ceremony, have we seen a slight improvement?
Well, this year in the data reported by the Violence Policy Center of women killed by men, we actually slipped to number 11, and that is South Carolina's best showing in that report. I would like everybody, though, to be very guarded in what that means. 1 year of data does not change a pattern of 2 decades. And if we look at the SLED crime report from last year, we'll see that we had more homicides related to intimate partner violence. So what we do know is, although we had a good year showing in the data this year, tragic as those numbers and each and every life involved in that report is, next year may look very different. So we still have to be very vigilant, and we have a lot of work still to do here.
What has been the real impact of the virus, if any, on domestic violence in our state?
Well, I think we've seen numbers rise. During the initial part of the pandemic, when people were in quarantine, reports to police went down, but now they're higher than they were this time last year. We're seeing that in the immediate part of the pandemic, the calls to our member organizations and requests for service decreased, and we don't know whether that was if people couldn't find a way to call, if they just assumed that services were closed. So our member organizations have stayed open. Those hotlines are open 24/7, and people will find shelter for you if you need assistance. And that might not be in a traditional shelter, it might be in a hotel or some other kind of safe housing. But those services are available, and the other services they offer too, whether that be counseling, that can be done remotely. We still have legal services and can help people find an attorney. So all those services are still available. So we really urge people, if you need help, if you don't feel safe, please reach out and call, and somebody will be able to help you find a way to safety and healing.
I mentioned that it's Scott-Vasa, but you are a coalition. All of the organizations throughout the state are not called Scott-Vasa.
No, Scott-Vasa has 22 member organizations in every community across the state, providing services in every community. So even if you don't see an organization based in your town, services will still be available. So we encourage you to go to our website, which is scottvasa.org, and there's a map there, and you can click on your county, and it will tell you how to contact the organization that provides services where you are.
Thank you, Sarah. One message that we hope to get across today is that there is hope and help for victims of domestic violence. There are myriad organizations and agencies across the state that are just a phone call away. One such agency is Safe Passage SC. They stand ready to provide support services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse in York, Chester, Lancaster, and Union counties.
Safe Passage assists victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and child abuse. And I serve as the Associate Director for Advocacy and Community Services. South Carolina currently ranks number 11th in the nation for domestic violence related deaths. That would be females murdered due to domestic violence. In the past 20 years, South Carolina has been in the top 10. Safe Passage actually serves York, Chester, and Lancaster counties for domestic violence. And we see domestic violence in all of those counties, from people of all walks of life in every situation. Domestic violence is something that crosses all barriers, be it ethnicities, socioeconomics, religion, doesn't matter. We see domestic violence in all communities. We are seeing an increase in clients at this time. We are very, very busy. Lots of severe cases. That's one of the things I will say that we've noticed most of all. When people are calling us or coming in for services, things are bad. Things are bad. It's a lot more of people coming in with some type of physical abuse happening rather than just the verbal or emotional abuse. There's been a lot more physical contact happening. Your clients are in a sense kind of trapped right now with the person that is harming them. And so it can be very difficult for them to get out of that situation in order to even reach out for services. So I just talked with my staff this past week, and we discussed the importance of reassuring people how proud we are, how relieved we are when they do call us, because we do recognize how difficult that can be. We are scheduling around people's schedules with children at home, with a partner at home. Maybe it's just that hour a day that the person gets to go to the grocery store, or that hour per week, rather that they're out of the house, that we get to talk with them. Earlier this week, I was talking to someone, and we were discussing how often when people think about domestic violence, they think about those people over there. But I want them to understand that domestic violence happens in your neighborhood. It happens to your neighbors, your friends, your loved ones, your coworkers. Domestic violence is happening all the time, and certainly to people that you do know, no matter their circumstance in life. And so in keeping that in mind, I just hope that we are less judgmental, more loving and caring and helpful to people. And that if we see someone struggling or in need, that we try and connect them with community resources that can better their situations. We have a group, a domestic violence education group, that helps people to know and be able to recognize domestic violence, how domestic violence impacts them and their families, their children. And then our hope and goal is that moving forward, those clients will be able to recognize these signs as they move into new relationships. And we want them to have healthy relationships. And so that is a wonderful tool for them. And also the therapy piece, people being able to work through the trauma that they have experienced and begin a healing process from that trauma. Our shelter services, of course, are still running in the shelter. We've, of course, because of social distancing, we can't have as many people in our shelter as we could before. We're currently able to accept 4 families into our shelter program at this time. And that's not a lot, considering that we serve 3 counties. So we're having to utilize off-site resources for housing people. As far as our advocacy and counseling services, we are using virtual platforms to be able to perform those duties. We're using email, we're using the phone. We're still being in contact with clients on a regular basis, but virtually. Domestic violence does not get better over time, it gets worse. We know that, and we want people to keep themselves safe. So if that means that you have to endure what you can until you can get you and your children into a safe situation, we understand that, and we want them to know that we support them in whatever decisions that they have to make, and we're here to help them.
In tonight's Women Vision segment, we feature Deborah Blalock, one of the state's leading mental health administrators and advocates. Deborah was the first woman appointed as Deputy Director of the Community Mental Health Services at the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. She's responsible for statewide outpatient services, those provided by 16 mental health centers. Her advice for good mental health: follow your passion and don't ever forget to take care of yourself. Tonight's honoree, Deborah Blalock.
Really follow your dreams, follow your passion. Don't ever forget to take care of yourself. That's critically important. I think as women, we don't always do that very well. We're really busy taking care of everybody else's needs, and we put ourselves last. And then we find ourselves maybe in a place of resentment, which isn't a great place to work from. So it's take care of yourself. and be mindful of what your needs are and expressing your needs. Your needs are just as valuable as anybody else's needs in your family.
That's the advice of Deborah Blalock, the first female Deputy Director for Community Mental Health Services with the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. She oversees a network of 16 mental health centers around the state.
For me, it's really gratifying because not only do we see people when they're at their most difficult times in their lives, but we see them recover. That doesn't mean cure, but we see them live to their full potential despite their mental illness. And that is so gratifying to see folks come from the depths to achieve whatever they want to achieve.
Before taking over as Deputy Director, Blalock was Executive Director of the Charleston-Dorchester Mental Health Center. She expanded use of a mobile unit that would become a model for the state.
It's a very important life-saving program. It's a 24/7 crisis response program. So regardless of where a person is and they're in psychiatric crisis, regardless of who calls us, the team can go out and serve the individual who's in crisis and make sure they get to the level of care that they need.
She was director of the Charleston Mental Health Center during a time of tragedy for the community, the Mother Emanuel shooting in which 9 lives were lost.
So that was probably the most profound experience of my career thus far, responding to that. The mental health center at that time had a clinician embedded in the Charleston Police Department. So the night of the massacre, we had a clinician boots on the ground a half an hour after the shooting. And she was located in the hotel where the families were being brought to learn the fate of their loved ones. And from that moment forward, the mental health center was very involved. So we attended every wake, we attended every funeral, we attended just about every prayer service that was held. We stationed clinicians in front of the church to help folks who were coming by to pay their respects, because we saw people mourning right on the sidewalk and not having anywhere to go. So the Sunday after the shooting, when I was driving to the church, I wondered if my race would get in the way of my providing the comfort that I was going to deliver. And I will say the members of the congregation never let that get in the way. I was immediately welcomed in.
Deborah Blalock grew up in Charleston with 2 sisters.
My father is Lebanese, and his parents immigrated from Lebanon and from Palestine. And my mother's father immigrated from Italy. So we had a very unique mixed kind of culture. The Arabic culture is a culture that is not particularly feministic, I'll say. But my father was a very interesting man. He instilled in my sisters and me that we could be whatever we wanted to be, despite the fact that he may feel differently about women's response outside of his 3 daughters. So he always supported us that way, and so did my mother.
So that early support helped you as you found your career?
I think so. We always believed, my sisters and I always believed, like the universe was ours to go grab and excel and succeed, and we knew we'd always have that love and support from home.
And that support has undoubtedly been a factor in her own lifelong vision.
My most proud achievement is raising 5 really wonderful young men and women. I have 1 daughter and 4 sons, and making sure that they achieve their dreams and they believe that they have value and worth and can achieve anything they want to achieve. It means so much to me when my children, especially my daughter, I guess I'll say, who's 32, says, "I'm so proud of who you are, Mom. You know, you're my hero." Who could want to hear more than that your children think that you're their hero?
For more stories about our state, and of course more details on those stories you've just seen, do visit our website at palmettoscene.org. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at SCETV, #PalmettoScene. Tonight, we leave you with sights and sounds from this year's Silent Witness ceremony. For Palmetto Scene, I'm Beryl Dakers. Good night. Stay strong, and thanks for watching.